Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh says Operation Sindoor against Pakistan is still not over. Adds New Delhi won't escalate for now, but will retaliate if provoked. Operation Sindoor came in response to the Pahalgam terror attack in April. Chinese President Xi Jinping tells Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin that Beijing stands with Moscow against the hegemonic bullying during a state visit. Xi is in Moscow for 3 days and will attend Russia's Victory Day parade tomorrow. North Korea launches multiple short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea, just days after leader Kim Jong-un showcased a new set of weapon systems on his Navy's largest warship. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi dismisses the United Kingdom's claims of a terror plot targeting Israel's embassy in London after British police arrested 7 Iranian nationals over suspected terror links. And sources say the upcoming Indian Premier League match between Mumbai Indians and Punjab Kings on Sunday has been moved from Dharamshala to Ahmedabad after unrest and airport closure linked to India-Pakistan tensions. Hello and welcome. We begin with India and Pakistan's latest flare-up. It hasn't gone unnoticed in Africa. Some nations have urged calm, while others have weighed their words carefully. Egypt's foreign ministry has released a statement. In light of the situation, Cairo called for restraint. The country expressed concerns over the hostilities that have resulted in casualties on both sides. Egypt's foreign ministry stressed avoiding any escalation and made it clear that it is closely monitoring the situation. It also called on the arch rivals to resolve the standoff through diplomacy and dialogue rather than military exchanges. India launched missile strikes on Pakistan early on Wednesday. It bombed 9 terror camps during the assault and said it was in response to the Pahalgam terror attack in April. The precision strikes were organized carefully, aiming to avoid harm to civilian areas and Pakistan's army installations. The latest cross-border violence is the deadliest both the nuclear-armed rival neighbors have seen in decades. India maintains that the Pahalgam terror attack, which claimed the lives of 26 innocent civilians, was orchestrated by Pakistan-based terrorists, and its military operation was needed to deliver justice to the victims. The Angolan president, who was on a state visit to India recently, condemned the bloodbath that unfolded in Kashmir last month. He expressed Angola's firm stand against terrorism and stated that Angola was among the first nations to react to the tragedy.
Angola was one of the first to react immediately after the sad event in the Kashmir region, where human lives were victimized. In due time, we made the Indian authorities realize our feelings of sorrow to the Indian people and their families. Since it was an act of terrorism, and Angola obviously condemns any terrorism, regardless of where it is committed.
His remarks were welcomed by Indian leaders. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Draupadi Murmu both thanked him for extending Angola's support.
जम्मू कश्मीर के पहलगाम में हुई नृशंस आतंकवाद हमले के बाद आपके समर्थन और एकजुटता की प्रबल अभिव्यक्ति के लिए भारत सरकार और भारत की जनता की ओर से आपको धन्यवाद.
As the current chair of the African Union, Angola's condemnation of the Pahalgam massacre carries diplomatic weight. The African Union, or the AU, is a continental organization. It consists of 55 countries and works toward peace, development and coordination across the continent. As tensions spiked between India and Pakistan over Pahalgam, India wasted no time in reaching out to key African nations. The Foreign Minister of Algeria held a phone call with his Indian counterpart, Jaishankar, and expressed condolences. Jaishankar also spoke with the foreign ministers of Sierra Leone and Somalia, all non-permanent members of the UNSC. In each call, he underlined India's zero tolerance toward terrorism. It was to ensure that India's stance gets amplified in the world's second biggest continent. As the armed conflict between India and Pakistan draws international attention, African nations have responded with concern and calls for calm. Now, for more on this, we have with us on the show Ambassador Rajiv Batia, a distinguished fellow Gateway House. He is joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you for being with us, Ambassador.
Thank you.
How do African nations like Egypt and Angola typically position themselves in South Asian conflicts? And what does their response to the recent escalation between India and Pakistan indicate about their evolving foreign policy priorities?
Thank you very much for inviting me to the show. Indeed, Angola and Egypt have spoken. So have two other nations as well from Africa, that is Kenya and South Africa. The broad common features in all these reactions are quite easy to decipher. First of all, there is condemnation of international terrorism, particularly this example of terrorism of which India is a victim. And this condemnation is accompanied by a sense of solidarity and sympathy for the victims, that is India. Then another feature is an offer by some of the countries to work closely with India in the struggle against terrorism. And a few others talk about restraint to be shown by the two neighbors, India and Pakistan. And yet, the common feature also is that, no one seems to be ready to name Pakistan as the epicenter of terrorism. So this is largely the broader picture of the reactions from Africa.
Right. Right. And Ambassador, Egypt has urged for restraint, as you mentioned, from both India and Pakistan, while Angola condemned the Pahalgam terror attack. Do these differing responses suggest a fragmentation in Africa's approach to international conflict resolution, or do they reflect nuanced bilateral interests?
No, it is not fragmentation. Africa does not always speak with one single voice. The matter probably has not been discussed at the level of the African Union. They don't have a common foreign policy. So each country is completely free to determine its own responses. I think we have to take note of the fact that Egypt has spoken both through its foreign minister and also through its ambassador in Delhi. They have conveyed that Egypt is very upset and angry with this latest manifestation of terrorism in India. On the other hand, Angola is a little bit more different because the president was visiting India at that time. So quite apart from public reaction, I'm sure he discussed this matter in detail with the Indian leadership, and he was able to convey Angola's deep sympathy and support for India.
Yes. And to what extent could African diplomatic engagement contribute to de-escalation efforts between nuclear-armed India and Pakistan? And is there any precedent for such influence?
Basically, the expectation here in Delhi is that Africa, being a very important strategic partner, it would be in a good position to understand the price India is paying for having a neighbor who's driven by terrorism and the desire for revenge and retribution. So essentially, African engagement diplomatically can certainly help clarifying the matter to the global community. India has done so much for the global south. India has played a major role in getting the African Union full membership of G20. But of course, we know that Africa has its own different divergent ways to look at these things. No country basically wants to take position when it comes to a conflict between two countries in South Asia. And therefore, I think India is very realistic. India is very understanding. India will keep briefing and outreaching to the African countries. And our effort, our diplomatic effort, will certainly make a difference in the way in which Africa looks at this problem.
Thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you for calling. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Shifting focus to Sudan, where the wartime capital Port Sudan is under continuous attack by the paramilitary RSF. Thursday marked the 5th consecutive day of RSF strikes on Port Sudan. The latest attacks targeted Sudan's largest naval base, as well as a fuel depot, causing massive fire, as per reports. Now, there have been no reports of casualties. Earlier targets included the port's container terminal and Port Sudan International Airport. In a televised address delivered amid a backdrop of rising smoke, Sudan's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, vowed retribution.
The Sudanese people are not frightened by such incidents nor scared by such calamities. The Sudanese people are educated, fighters, and have made history and built civilizations, and will not be frightened by such acts. We say to all who have attacked the Sudanese people, the hour of retribution will come.
Port Sudan on the Red Sea coast has served as the de facto capital of Sudan's army-backed government, until the army recently recaptured Khartoum from the RSF forces, who had taken control shortly after war broke out in April of 2023. Since then, Port Sudan has functioned as a safe haven, hosting hundreds of thousands of displaced people and United Nations offices. Until Sunday, when the drone strikes began, it is also the primary entry point for humanitarian aid into the country. Now, the conflict has effectively split Sudan, with the RSF holding strongholds in the west and south, while the army controls much of the north, east and center. The RSF has declared a parallel government in the territories it controls, and after losing Khartoum, it has intensified its offensive. The army describes the latest attacks as a full-fledged crime of aggression, carried out with strategic drones and advanced weaponry. Sudan has accused the United Arab Emirates of supplying the RSF with these weapons and has cut diplomatic ties, calling it an aggressor state.
Following this continued aggression, the Security and Defense Council decided, first, declaring the United Arab Emirates a hostile state, Second, severing diplomatic relations with it. Third and finally, withdrawing the Sudanese embassy and general consulate. In accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter, which gives states the right to self-defense, Sudan reserves the right to respond to aggression through all means to preserve the country's sovereignty and unity of its lands, and to ensure the protection of civilians and continued access to humanitarian aid.
The UAE has denied arming the RSF, rejecting the cutting of ties. It claimed the decision came from an administration that does not represent the legitimate government of Sudan. This comes days after the International Court of Justice, earlier this week, dismissed a case filed by Sudan, accusing the UAE of complicity in genocide through support for the RSF. The situation remains precarious, the war escalating week by week. Meanwhile, civilian lives continue to be deeply affected, caught in the crossfire of a relentless conflict. China is flexing its military muscle in North Africa. In a rare display, its warplanes took to the Egyptian skies above the pyramids. Beijing is signaling a new phase of defense cooperation, and it involves one of America's closest partners in the region. Chinese fighter jets, helicopters and cargo planes cut across Egyptian airspace, marking the end of the first ever joint Air Force drills with Cairo. The 18-day exercises were seen as a direct message. Beijing is strengthening its ties in a region long influenced by the U.S.
Our pilots and those of the Egyptian Air Force learned from each other and honed our skills, fully showing the PLA Air Force's exceptional combat readiness and formidable operational capabilities.
China's state media celebrated the drills with footage of night launches and formation flights. It was dubbed as a new era of cooperation is taking off above Cairo. The operation, named Eagles of Civilization 2025, was described as a milestone for both air forces. The drills come at a time when Washington has pulled back from some of its foreign security commitments. As U.S. aid to Egypt shrinks, China has been quick to fill the gap, pumping billions into defense and technology projects in North Africa. Experts say the joint exercises helped Egypt project power amid a fragile regional landscape. Cairo faces unrest on multiple fronts: the war in Gaza, conflict in Sudan, and chaos in Libya. Working with China helps Egypt modernize its military, and it also sends a message of independence to Washington. Analysts think China's motive is to build trust with Egypt and then expand arms sales like drones and missiles. However, the U.S. can push back if Egypt turns it back against Washington completely. It could retaliate by cutting off military funding. Now, China's Air Force described the drills as a new starting point, saying it paves the way for deeper defense partnership between Beijing and Cairo. Beijing has been increasing its strategic footprint through investments in Egypt's defense industry. For the recent military drills, China sent several aircraft. Among the aircraft sent by the People's Liberation Army were the KJ-500 early warning, the Yu-20 aerial refueler, and the J-10 fighter jets. The drills, dubbed Eagles of Civilization, signal more than just military partnership. They also show a shifting alliance in a region long dominated by the West. And now, onto our story on U.S. President Donald Trump's controversial deportation plans. New reports suggest Trump may be considering sending migrants to Libya. Now, some U.S. officials have revealed that the U.S. military could fly migrants to Libya. They mentioned it could happen as early as Wednesday, but stressed that the plans remain subject to change. President Trump claimed that he was unaware of any such plans and referred questions to the Department of Homeland Security. However, reports have caught the attention of U.S. judges. A federal judge warned the Trump administration that deporting migrants to Libya or any country where they are not citizens without due process, would violate existing court orders. The judge emphasized that such actions could put migrants at risk of harm or death. Now, Libya's government of national unity has rejected any such plan, stating that migrants cannot be deported to Libya without their consent. They clarified that there has been no coordination with the US over any migrant transfers. Meanwhile, Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army, which controls eastern Libya, also opposed the plan, calling it a violation of Libya's sovereignty. The US State Department, prior to Trump taking office, had criticized Libya for its harsh, life-threatening prison conditions. Libya is a major transit point for Europe-bound migrants. Human rights organizations have documented abuses in overcrowded detention centers where migrants face indefinite detention and torture. But for Donald Trump, immigration remains a key political issue. He gained a second term on promises to deport undocumented migrants, and Libya may not be the only African nation under consideration. Just days ago, Rwanda confirmed it is in early talks with the US regarding a possible migrant deal. Rwanda was earlier in talks with the UK for a similar deal, but that was scrapped. As immigration emerges as a central issue for the US and European nations, they continue to explore third country options for deportations. Despite concerns, African nations remain at the top of that list. And that's it on the show for today. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.